Welcome to OJAICAST. I'm your host, Christopher Noxon, and I'm excited to explore with you the lineup of this year's Ojai Music Festival. One of the great things about the festival is how fundamentally it changes year to year. Last summer, we had the innovative flutist Claire Chase, whose curation took us on a journey from the Libby Bowl to mythological Greece and beyond, into the ecosystem and the spiritual realms of the Ojai Valley. And this June, we're celebrating the festival's 80th year. And we're so excited to have Esa-Pekka Salonen as music director, bringing an incredible program to Ojai, including the stellar orchestra from the Colburn School of Los Angeles and the LA Phil New Music Group. On this first episode of the season, we have the pleasure of having Ara Guzelimian join us to discuss how Esa-Pekka came into the picture and what he's bringing to the festival as conductor, composer, and educator. Ara Guzelimian has been the artistic and executive director of the Ojai Music Festival for the past 6 years. This will be his final year in that role, and he's decided to go out with a bang with Esa-Pekka Salonen. I'm excited for Ara to walk us through some of what to expect this year, and also eager to hear his thoughts on the festival as a whole in his last year as artistic director. So, welcome, Ara.
Thanks. It's lovely to be back with you.
We are especially excited this year because we have Esa-Pekka Salonen as the music director this year, and many of us know him as the music director of the LA Phil. But I understand he's been here before 99 and 2001, I guess. So how did we get him back?
Yeah, it's amazing that it's been 25 years since he was last here. And of course, he's a great local hero because of his work with the LA Phil. But even that's now 17 years ago, 18 years ago. And he turned over the orchestra to Gustavo Dudamel, whose own time is coming to a close as we speak. I worked for the LA Phil when Esa-Pekka first arrived there, and so our friendship goes back to his earliest LA days. In one of his early visits, he had a complete day off. I said, why don't I drive you out to the desert? And as a Finn who had already begun to establish himself internationally and been to many cities, he had never really seen the California desert.
Wow.
And he always talks about that day in which once you cross through the Angeles Crest and drop down into the desert, he said, now I know the landscape and now I know we've been somewhere else.
Nice. And he was here for 2 years with only a year in between,
right,
and then 25 years gap. How did that sort of transpire?
About a year and a half ago, I texted him and said, are you free for a call?
Uh-huh.
And usually I wouldn't be asking his permission. I mean, we know each other. I'd be calling him, and I think it got his attention in a different way. And he texted back sort of quizzically, yes.
Yeah.
And I called him and said, so I have an idea. Would you come and be music director in Ojai in 2026? And he said, oh, that sounds like fun. Nice. He said, can I just have 24 hours to think about it and look at my calendar? And exactly a day later, he texted me and said, we're on. And we've had a lot of fun putting our heads together.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. And, he's obviously a conductor and a composer and a curator and an educator. He wears so many hats. What do you think that sort of brings to the festival?
All of those hats, which makes me very happy. A chapter in his life that's not so well known publicly is in recent years he's been teaching at the Colburn School in Los Angeles.
Right.
And I think the Colburn School is still one of the least known treasures of musical life, both nationally, but even within Southern California. And I wanted to represent all the dimensions of his life at this festival. So he'll be coming with the musicians of the Colburn Orchestra, who are fantastic. These are some of the best young musicians on the planet.
Wow.
And conducting the Colburn Orchestra and the Friday night and Sunday afternoon concerts.
How big of an outfit is that?
We will have about 50 musicians.
Wow.
And I thought it was really important in an anniversary year not to dwell so much on the past, but face forward. And there is nothing like energizing the place than 50 young, fabulous musicians with a really incredible senior musician like Esa-Pekka Salonen guiding them.
That will be different from the last few years anyway, to have that number of musicians on stage. That's really exciting. Obviously he's also a composer, and I want to get into a little bit of his music itself. What are you looking forward to as far as his compositions being performed this year?
We're doing, I think, 7 or 8 of his pieces scattered throughout the festival, including a brand new piece that he's writing right now as we speak, which will have its U.S. premiere. So the ink will be barely dry. It's a duo for violin and cello that will be on the opening night program. And most of the music we're playing of his is not only from the last 20 years, but from really the last 5 years. And Esa-Pekka's arc as a composer is really interesting. He's Finnish, of course, and studied in Italy with 2 very prominent, very adventurous, sort of classic modernist 20th century composers. And he arrived in California steeped in that very edgy and dramatically adventurous European modernism.
Yeah.
And he's become a Californian over the last 30 years. And he'd be the first to acknowledge it. And the openness of creative life in California to just about any influence, and the loosening up of that strict European modernism to something that's a little kickier and freer, combined with that foundation, has completely changed him. And he has become, to me, a transplanted California composer.
Well, it started in the desert, Ara.
It started in the desert. The Mojave Desert will do that.
Where do you see, I know he's going to be doing Lachen Verlernt on Saturday evening. Where do you see that fitting in that sort of spectrum?
It's sort of smack in the middle of that transition.
Okay.
It has elements of certainly of European modernism, and it ends unbelievably virtuosically. I mean, it's sort of like the violin equivalent of a wild Jimi Hendrix solo.
Nice.
It really goes crazy at the end.
Let's take a quick listen to that. Okay, that was a piece composed by Esa-Pekka Salonen called
Lachen Verlernt. It's a piece for solo violin, and I think the violinist in that performance is Tim Fain. We will have a very brilliant young American violinist named Geneva Lewis play that piece on the Saturday night program.
That's exciting. If that sort of represents the center of his continuum, what would you think of as being sort of the most California current version?
Well, in a sense, a piece that only dates from, I think, 5-6 years ago, called Fog, is very indicative of how life changed for him. Fog is an extremely affectionate piece written in honor of Frank Gehry's 90th birthday, and Esa-Pekka and Frank became inseparably close friend. Esa-Pekka really became family for the Gehrys, and I've seen that dynamic in action. And when we were planning this about a year ago, Frank Gehry was still very much with us, but already struggling with health. And we looked at each other, and I was lucky enough to have my own friendship with Frank, and said, we just have to have Frank at Ojai. And we weren't anticipating that by the end of the year we would lose Frank. But he will be incredibly with us in spirit. And this is a piece that has a great backstory. When Disney Hall was under construction, both Frank and Esa-Pekka were just ridden with anxiety about, is it going to work?
Right.
You know, you're building this massive hundreds of $1 million building, and it looks beautiful, but what if it sounds terrible? That existential anxiety. So while it was under construction, when enough of the framework inside of the hall was in place, they had a kind of secret session in which they asked a violinist, Martin Fröst, the concertmaster of the LA Philharmonic, if he would go stand to about where the stage would be, and they would just sit in where the last row of seats would be, just to hear what it sounds like. And Martin said, well, what do you want me to play? And they said, just play, anything that's handy. Bach is great. And as both Frank and Esa-Pekka described it to me, they were sitting somewhat petrified, and they were literally holding hands together, saying, oh, please let this work. And the minute Martin started playing the Bach, they both knew it was going to work, and both were in tears at how beautiful it sounded. So in a few years ago, when Frank was turning 90, Esa-Pekka wrote this piece celebrating that moment in honor of Frank's birthday. And so it's sort of a riff on the Bach. And I would say, and Esa-Pekka might disagree with me, it even has hints of good California minimalism meets Bach. And I think we're going to hear just a tiny bit of the opening to give you the spirit of the piece, which is a little bit of a Salonen riff on Bach.
Nice. Let's take a listen to that. So that's a little piece of Fog, named after the initials of Frank Owen Geary and written by Esa-Pekka Salonen in honor of Frank Geary's 90th birthday. So there's a lot else going on at the festival this year. What are you looking forward to in this program?
Well, I have to say, this being my last as artistic director, the one thing that's extremely personal to me, just something that I wanted to hear at Libby Bowl, is Olivier Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time. This is one of the most astonishing pieces. It's a deeply spiritual piece. It's a deeply nature-connected piece. And something about hearing it in the magic of Libby Bowl at 9:00 at night as the birds are settling down and as the stars come out struck me as just an experience I want to have before I step down. The piece has an amazing origin story.
It has an unusual configuration, right?
Right. It's for violin, clarinet, cello, and piano. And I actually know of no other piece for that slightly unusual, idiosyncratic combination. Messiaen was a prisoner of war in a German camp. He was a French soldier who was captured and imprisoned with no sense of whether he would actually live or see a life outside this POW camp. And there were three other prisoners who were also musicians, soldiers who had been musicians in civilian life, who played clarinet, violin, and cello. And there was in this camp a kind of trashed bar piano, at least, available. Messiaen was deeply, deeply religious, deeply Catholic. And a lot of his music is sort of praise music and reflects his faith. And the other aspect of his spirituality is he was absolutely fixated with birdsong. And so he faithfully notated birdsong for his entire life. I mean, really literally notated in classic music notation, specific birds. And he incorporates both his spirituality, his faith, and his devotion to nature and birds. And this piece is so moving because under the darkest of circumstances, the imagination allows you to escape outside the prison walls, and he's literally able to keep the faith. And the first performance of this piece was in the prisoner of war camp for the fellow prisoners.
Wow.
And so it's an intensely personal kind of testimony that I think is just a tribute to the human spirit in dark times. And so as a result, it's good anytime and something we all need.
Yeah, that's great. Let's hear a little preview of Olivier Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time. And so that's Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time, which will close the opening night concert on Thursday night.
It will be played by the pianist Connor Hannock, the violinist Geneva Lewis, the cellist Jay Campbell, and the clarinetist Anthony McGill. Olivier Messiaen, fortunately for all of us, survived, and in 1985 was composer in residence at the Ojai Festival, just shy of his 80th birthday. And one of the appeals of coming to Ojai for him was to be able to take walks and notate birdsong of our birds. And there are some lovely, lovely photos of that visit of Messiaen and Ojai. So it's a little bit of a nod to our history as well.
Did I see in the program that there's also a performance of some music that incorporates birdsong at the Meadow this year?
Yes. One of the traditions I'm really proud to say that I helped start with our friends at Ojai Valley Land Conservancy is we instituted a free Saturday morning, what we lovingly call a meditation concert, just a concert of quiet, reflective music outdoors. And last year we did it at the Ojai Meadows Preserve. And it's at 8 a.m., but it's free. And so this year we're repeating that experience at the venue, but specifically in honor of Messiaen and focusing on music that in some ways inspired by birdsong, both by Messiaen, a composer named Franco Donatoni, who was one of Esa-Pekka Salonen's teachers, and I wouldn't be surprised if the actual birds respond, so you never know where the music's coming from.
Yeah, I was there last year, and it was really quite mystical, magical, all the great Ojai qualities. All the vortex was focused very intensely on that moment. So this is your last year as artistic director. We are all very sad about that. And I just wondered if as you look back on the last 6 festivals, and each has been so memorable and so different, what common threads can you identify there? What do you see as the story that these festivals have told?
I think over the 80 years, the festival has developed one of the most open and adventurous audiences. And you're right that I very consciously tried to make each year's festival quite different from the previous years. There was a little bit of, if you think you've got us figured out, just wait.
Contrariness.
Right. But I'm very proud to say that we've gotten the most amazing national press coverage for the little festival that could in Libby Park, in a town of 8,000 people. And last year, the New York Times came, and was so happy to see the headline said, "The most open-eared festival in America is in Ojai." And I thought, okay, that to me is meaningful acknowledgement.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. And that's part of the unbelievable legacy. Igor Stravinsky was here in the mid-50s as music director. Ojai has always attracted seekers, whether it's Krishnamurti or Annie Besant or Beatrice Wood, or let's go further back, all of the creative spirits among the Chumash and the rock sites and rock art sites that surround the valley. And so there's something very conducive to the openness to new experience about Ojai, and I think the music festival reflects that. And I hope when people begin to look back on my time, the best compliment I can imagine is for somebody to say, yeah, that reflected that Ojai spirit.
Nice. So I want to ask about the collaboration with the LA Dance Project. Tell me about that and what we can expect from that.
That came about fairly late. We were only able to announce it recently. The LA Dance Project is a fantastic LA-based company run by Benjamin Millepied, who was a great New York City ballet dancer, and then artistic director of the Paris Opera Ballet. He's creating with 4 choreographers a series of dances set to a group of sequenzas by Luciano Berio, the great Italian composer of the late 20th century. Each piece of music is like this intensely expressive, creative workout for the limits of each instrument. And Millepied said to Esa-Pekka that this was music so much on his mind that he always wanted to see dance to this music. And they're at work literally as we speak in LA for this project that will be born in Ojai.
Wow. Well, let's listen to a bit of Luciano Berio's Sequenza XIII for accordion. Wow. Well, so we're stretching the boundaries yet again on your way out. Thank you so much, Ara. This has been really exciting. I think we're all so excited to have it happen this year, but so sorry to see you go.
I won't be far. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I started coming to Ojai when I was in my mid-teens. I think I was 15 the first time, and I've no intention of leaving Ojai too far behind. But thank you so much for this time together, and thanks to everybody who's ever attended or supported the Ojai Music Festival.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to this summer. Thank you to Ara Guzelimian for the great stories about Esa-Pekka Salonen and for walking us through some of the concerts we're looking forward to at this year's Ojai Music Festival. Join us for future episodes with more conversations with amazing performers coming to the Valley for the festival's 80th year. Thanks so much for listening, See you at the festival. OJAICAST was produced by Will Thomas for the Ojai Music Festival. Visit ojaifestival.org for more information on the program, tickets, and please consider donating to the festival to keep innovative music coming to the Ojai Valley. You can find me on Instagram at Noxon Art or online at ChristopherNoxonArt.com.